Hey everyone, today we're dealing with a Frigidaire Affinity, or it could be an Electrolux Dryer, that is making some bad noises when it is working. The unit works, it heats, everything seems fine, but it's just extremely loud. These machines should not be probably over about 66, 67 decibels when running, but if you have an uncommon noise, let's take it apart to figure out what's going wrong in the machine to fix it. Now, if you need any parts that could be in this unit, I will have links in the description field as well as the comments. So if you buy those items, it does help support the channel so I can make more content on dryers like this and many other appliances. So let's go ahead and tear it down and get to it.
Depending on what could be the issue, you're going to need the following tools: a Phillips head screwdriver or a drill gun, which would make this a lot faster, 1 or 2 14mm sockets, depending on the situation, a long, thin, flathead screwdriver, and then a 1/4-inch hex head key. Additionally, it's possible that foreign objects, lint, or debris could cause the issue in your unit, so I would suggest a vacuum cleaner and possibly a flexible attachment to help you. In general though, all the things that we want to look at are inside the dryer, so let's go ahead and take it apart. And to do that, let's first start to move it to access the rear of the dryer. To get into the machine, remove the 2 screws on the rear of the dryer top and then slide the top back and then away from the unit. You may find a hidden tech manual here that can offer some help on the unit later on. We will use this much later in the video. At this stage, go ahead and unplug electricity from the wall. There are 2 screws that hold this interface into the bulkhead of the unit. There's also a wire holding the interface on that we need to remove. You can remove 2 screws from the metal bracket that kind of holds this harness in place. You can remove these screws to get an easier chance at removing the wire, but it's not actually needed. You may be able to just put a screwdriver in and pull it out. I would take a picture of any wires we remove from any sort of control board. Frigidaire has a bad habit of these harnesses fitting in the wrong plugs. With the interface wire removed, you can change into an entirely different shirt and remove the interface. Next, I'm going to remove these 2 screws that hold the dryer control board in place. This allows me to remove it from the bulkhead. Then you want to open the door of the dryer and locate the 2 screws that hold the front of the dryer onto the gray bulkhead behind the front. In the case of this unit, there are 2 screws that hold the lint filter housing in that need removed. These screws are very different from the others, but they're still Phillips head. Once you have them removed, close the door. Then at the bottom of the dryer, there are going to be 2 screws that need removed. One on each side that's not exactly on the corner of each, it's a little bit on the inside. This dryer is on a pedestal, so the angles are a bit odd to remove them. If your unit is not stacked like this, you can easily lean it against a wall for much easier access, but I cannot do it on this unit. There are 2 more final screws to remove at the very top of the dryer front, one on the left, one on the right. Once you have these 2 out, the door may want to move forward and away from the unit, so be ready to catch it potentially. From here, carefully lift the door up and away from the dryer. Only remove it partially though, as you need to remove the door switch wire in between the door and the bulkhead of the unit. With the front off, you can investigate any irregularities with the unit. We need to first remove the switch from the control board that plugs into the door light. Make sure to photograph this or note its location, as again, it could vary from board to board. Go ahead and use your screwdriver to remove the 2 lower screws on the bulkhead. Once off, lift the bulkhead up and gently move it away. Note that in the lower right corner, the door switch wire harness will be held on with a cable tie. You can use a pair of needle nose pliers to pinch the tie and remove it from the bulkhead without cutting it. Then you can finally remove the bulkhead from the unit, or you could just place it to the side without taking this off. When you have this done, we can look further into the unit for any trouble areas. The next step we have to deal with is to take the drum out. Just remember that there are sharp metal corners on your dryer, so when you reach in, you would want to wear gloves and possibly a long sleeve shirt. This dryer had some dangerous thrash metal in it, but you are far more likely to find sharp, dangerous metal that would actually cut you instead, so watch out. Next, reach in with both hands and locate the idler pulley on the right side behind the blower and motor assembly. The idler will need pulled off to your left to loosen tension on the belt, then move the belt away from the motor pulley. This will let you take the drum out. With the belt away from the pulley, use the belt to lift the drum up and out of the dryer. Some versions of these Electrolux Frigidaire dryers could have cuts in the middle of the bulkhead to make it easier to take the drum out from the chassis, but others do not. We now have full access to the inside of the dryer drum to check for irregularities or what could be causing any sort of noise in the unit. The first thing you could look at, which is easy, is the idler pulley. Is it damaged or does it make noise when you rotate it freely, or are there any obstructions in it? If so, it's likely that this could be the culprit of the noise. The entire assembly comes as one purchasable piece, the metal idler arm and the pulley wheel, and it slots into a bracket on the motor pulley assembly, along with the spring. Another area to inspect is the blower housing. Slowly and rapidly rotate the blower housing. Does it spin smoothly? Are all the fins attached to it? Does it make any noise that could suggest something is binding in it causing the problem? This one seems to be a one-piece housing that would need totally replaced in one piece if you had a major issue with this. But one consideration also is that if you do find an obstruction, you may be able to use a vacuum cleaner on the rear side and remove the obstruction, potentially, if you can't access it from the front like it looks like we cannot do on this unit. The metal tube could be separated by removing tape and any associated screws with it, but everything's clean on this, so I don't have to do that. Another area you could check if you are getting noise from this system is behind the blower where the motor is. Make sure to spin the motor by the motor pulley and listen if noise is coming from the motor. It's possible that something could have dislodged in the motor that could be cleaned or removed, but if the motor itself is clean and there's still noise persisting on the inside, it would be the bearings of the motor that could be going bad, and you would have to replace the motor to solve that issue. The next thing to check for on the unit, which is very, very common, are the roller wheels. There are 2 on the bulkhead behind the front, then there are 3 on the bulkhead of the dryer itself. On these rollers, you'd want to check for flat spots on the black rubber, the white insides of the roller wheel being warped or bent, and then any obstructions or damage to the roller shaft that could cause it to bind up, making the noise be very loud. I would suggest also to clean the inside of the unit at this point. It can help remove any other small, minor potential obstructions from the unit, just in case. Often the rollers usually are the culprit of this, and you can clean those to possibly solve the issue. Another unlikely but possible culprit is a worn and shredded belt. Usually they will snap entirely, but it's also possible that some of the shreds of the belt could be hitting the chassis of the dryer, and viewing and replacing the belt is a quick, easy job to do, and I will have a link for this style belt in the description. And speaking of the drum, make sure to inspect the top of the dryer bulkhead inside the unit, in tandem with the drum as well. Do you see any damage to the felt of the drum, metal separation on the bulkhead itself, or a crack or damage in the drum? If so, this would be the problem, and honestly, the cost to replace the bulkhead or drum is too expensive to do, and you're going to be out of luck, but at least you know what's wrong. You can also check the bulkhead for hidden items that could have been stuck in the blower housing. I used a flexible hose on a vacuum cleaner that my business sells, and I will have a link to it in the description. Having said this, the hose kept getting blocked due to the volume of lint inside the dryer, so I decided to just reach in and see what was there. Holy cow, there's a lot of lint in this. Also, for full disclosure, you could have theoretically removed the 2 screws on the inside of the filter housing like you see, and cleaned it this way as well without having to do all the work of removing the drum. I did it this way to show you on camera a few different ways to check this housing, so you could at least know how everything routed to possibly clean it without all the work. Other than the obstructions, the most common problem is going to be the damaged roller wheels or the shafts of the units. So I want to show you real quick how to replace them due to how common this is. First, you're going to need that 14mm wrench or socket wrench. It will go on the nut, which is on the back side of the bulkhead. You'll need to take a 1/4-inch hex driver and insert it to the front of the roller wheel where there is an opening. You need to use that to secure it in place, then use the ratchet or wrench to turn and remove the nut, which will allow you to remove the roller and shaft from the bulkhead. As a note, there is a repair kit from Choice Parts that contains a new idler, belt, and 5 wheels for this unit all in one package. I will have a link to the description, as well as a posted comment. As a note, the interesting thing about these rollers are they are different from the ones we took off the unit. It looks like Frigidaire and most of the other companies changed the design more recently than when this dryer was made. These wheels are blue, and the shaft has a spacer on it that makes it identical in size, but it's quite differently installed than these original OEM ones. And I'll show you how to do that real quick. To install this style roller, you're going to remove the nut on the back side of the roller, which again is 14mm. But when you want to install these replacements, you need a 14mm socket to insert on the top of the roller shaft to hold it in place instead of the 1/4-inch hex head key like what we had from the OEM style. With the nut in place behind the bulkhead, put the roller, shaft, and gray spacer on top and use the wrench and socket to tighten the assembly down. Once you have that done, the roller should spin freely and easily on the shaft. If it's tight or bound up, then you installed it the wrong way and you'll have to start all over again. Here's the other roller that we have on the unit. I'm going to do the same thing here. 1/4 inch hex head on the front and a 14mm ratchet to loosen the nut on behind it. Remove the roller assembly, then insert the new blue roller and thread the nut on the back side of the shaft. Use the wrench to secure the nut in place and use the ratchet and socket to tighten the shaft down. The first one took me about a minute to get done, and now all the rest are quite easy. We now have 2 brand new rollers on the unit. Let's say you don't want to do this. You only want to replace the roller wheel itself, or you want to maintain and clean the roller shaft without the roller on it. You could alternatively use a thin, long, flat-bladed screwdriver and pry off the triangle clip that holds the roller wheel in place. On most models, this is hard to do, but I found on this style of Frigidaire is very, very easy. This would allow you to sand the shaft down, clean the roller, or replace just the roller instead of the whole assembly. The replacement rollers for these in this old style are very, very difficult to find, but I did source them from ERP, and I will have a link to the high quality replacement in the description if you just want to do it that way. This can be a very useful technique to use. The 3 rollers on the bulkhead are very, very difficult and cumbersome to replace, so simply using the screwdriver and replacing or servicing the roller shafts is a very, very easy process. But as a note, the Blue Choice Parts rollers shafts are not compatible with the old style systems, so you have to use one or the other. You can't use choice part rollers on the old Frigidaire shafts. You have to use one or the other. And let's say then that the shafts are damaged on your dryer and you have to replace them. I'll show you how to do it on the bulkhead. You need to access the dryer from the rear of the unit. There are 5 screws on the back plate at the top of the dryer to remove. 2 on the top, then 3 on the back of the plate need removed. Once you have all these done, pull the plate up and move it to the top of the dryer. It's still going to be held in by 2 cable ties and a wire trunk. Then begin to start removing the screws from the back plate. There are roughly 14 to 16 screws around the edges of the rear of this dryer that you'll need to take apart. If your unit is stacked like mine is, there may be 4 to 8 extra screws that you'll need to remove, but I'm not going to show you that because maybe you don't have the pedestal. All these screws on the cover are identical except one near the blower in the rear, which is a bit longer. And when you do this, I would suggest removing all the screws except the 2 in the middle. Save those for the very last. Once you have all the screws around the edges removed, remove the 2 in the middle. Be careful because the plate will move backwards in a way when they are released. You now have access to clean behind the bulkhead, replace the terminal block if it was damaged, or do something with the moisture sensor wire harness. Now, if you want to remove the roller wheels, it's the same technique we showed earlier. Use the 1/4 inch hex head to secure the front of the shaft in place. Use the 14mm ratchet to remove the bolt from the system. I'm not sure if this part needs really any explanation, but you can see how I'm installing it from the rear side forward one by one. And there isn't an easier way to do this because, again, the shaft sizes are different that require us to get access to the back of the unit, and there's not enough room to use, say, an angled wrench to get in. With all the rollers replaced or any other task you had at the back side of the unit, you can go ahead and reinstall the panel into place and do this in reverse order. Start with the 2 screws in the middle, then work your way around the edges and then the pedestal bracket if needed. A drill gun again makes this very, very quick despite the fact that you have tons of screws. The top bracket will go into place the same way we did earlier and attach the 5 screws. If the top screws don't line up with the screw holes, install the rear ones first and it will help them line up easier. And these are all the major things I would look at that could cause your dryer to make noise during operation. Let's go ahead and reassemble the dryer to test it and make sure that the noise is fully gone. First, make sure that the idler pulley didn't have the spring or any other components accidentally pop off. The spring popped off on this one and I need to reattach it. Make sure that the belt is oriented right as well around the drum. Make sure that the belt is installed on the ridge where you see a wear pattern on the drum. This also shows you which side of the drum needs inserted first, as the rear ridge will orient where the idler, pulley, and motor are. Be careful to slowly insert the drum back into the unit. The drum will rest on the rear bulkhead in between the roller wheels, so it should be somewhat snug and secure. When you have the drum installed, reach your hands into where the idler pulley is and pull the pulley towards you to the left or the camera's right, and then loop the belt around the motor pulley. The plastic pulley has a huge groove in it, so it only orients one way and is very secure once you get it in the right way. Make sure the ridges of the belt are lined facing on the inside of the drum so it catches the teeth on the motor pulley as well. When the drum is installed, you can rotate it and it should spin the blower housing wheel to make sure the system's installed properly and there's no noise coming from anything within the blower, belt, or idler system. Usually, if you have a noise issue that is still persisting, this is a good point to check and see if everything works by spinning the drum and then confirming that you had solved the problem. We want to go ahead and put the bulkhead back on, and there are 4 holes for tabs on the side of the bulkhead to rest on. To install the bulkhead, bring it to the chassis and slowly line it up into place. On this model, the tabs on the top will slot into place, allowing you to line up the screws with the chassis. It may take some time to line these two up. Once it fits into place, it will slot in. You may have to rotate the drum to get it to slide in smooth for it to line up on the rollers that were on the front of the bulkhead that you can't see as it's behind the bulkhead in front of the drum. It can take a few moments to get this right, but at least for me on this particular unit, it wasn't hard. Then you want to reinstall 2 bottom screws into the bulkhead. Go ahead and snap the door switch wire harness back into the bulkhead like you see here, and then go ahead and reinstall the door light switch into the main control board. On mine, it only had one area to install, but yours could be different, and again, refer to any pictures that you've taken. If you haven't yet, install the 2 screws onto the control board cross plate once the fingers are inserted of the bulkhead like you see here. Finally, at this stage, we can put the door back into place. When putting the front of this dryer back on, don't forget at this stage to reinstall the door wire harness into the front of the unit before you secure it to the bulkhead. Like the bulkhead, it has tabs to rest on the dryer chassis that need lined up. There are 4 of them, and this is a slow process, but at least it wasn't too difficult for me to do. Once you have it lined up and secured, install the 2 screws at the top of the door between the door front and the bulkhead into the chassis, one on the left side and one on the right side. Go ahead and open the door and reinstall the 2 large screws that were at the bottom of the filter housing. Go ahead then and reinstall the wire that goes from the interface to the control board. Make sure to reinsert the wire to the correct receptacle on the board. And again, I removed the metal bracket so you could see how this was installed. You don't have to do this if you didn't remove it in the first place. 2 small tabs on the interface will lock into the front of the dryer, securing it into place with all the wires back into place. And you could test the dryer at this point. Everything's more or less reassembled. This is all the major things I would look for on a Frigidaire Electrolux dryer that is making noise. Note that this unit has the newer style with rollers. There are other Frigidaire Electrolux styles out there that have, say, a cup and bearing system on the rear rather than the rollers. One day I will try to make a video on those older style if I have time, but for now, I hope this video helps you. And again, if you needed any of the parts, make sure to check the comment and description feed for what I use to replace on this dryer. It does help the channel if you buy them from the links that we have. Have a great day.